Huh.
Okay.
Sounds intimidating. I'm going to change my first name to General.
Okay, here we are.
Well, welcome all, one and all.
We're live on YouTube. Here we are. It's DOOR3 TV open hours. And I'm here with Jonathan Blessing, who's currently on mute, who's the CEO of DOOR3.
I was on mute because I had to authorize the use of a computer so that one of my children can watch some art videos.
I see.
Mm-hmm. You might even see her.
She's in the background there. She looks like she's making an art video. We have Alex Asianov, who's the president and founder of DOOR3.
Hi. I'm never on mute because I'm searching for those hot mic embarrassing moments.
I'm Liz Flyntz. I'm the director of UX and design at DOOR3. And we're here to talk about risk tolerance in business and to straighten out my confusion between risk tolerance in business and fault tolerance, which is an engineering concept.
Yeah, well, I mean, fault tolerance. You can imagine when you're on a plane, and you want to feel secure that the instructions that the pilot is sending to the wings, can be received by the wings. I mean, Alex, you're a pilot. Maybe you know what? What am I doing?
Yeah, sure.
This is a perfect setup for you.
Sure. So airplanes, especially commercial airplanes, you really want to have security, and therefore systems are often redundant. You don't want one wire getting frayed to send an airliner down, right? So there are a multitude of mechanisms that prevent the fuel in the wing from exploding, things like that, right? So in mission critical situations like flying an airplane, you want to make sure that the systems are fault tolerant, and fault tolerance is literally the opposite of risk tolerance. It's non-tolerance for risk, and the provisioning of mechanisms to make sure that those risks are not realized.
Liz, I'm actually reminded of many years ago. I wrote a piece for one of our. I wrote a piece which I think you read and enjoyed, and it was looking at one of the things that engineers do, one of the practices of engineering which makes it distinct from, say, UX work, is that engineers think about the edge cases.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really where they put their time. So they don't think very hard about what the average load the bridge needs to carry. They think about what the greatest possible load the bridge might need to carry and how to engineer for that. Likewise, when engineering for a commercial aircraft, what goes through the mind of the engineers are all the things that could go wrong. Not like how it goes right, because how it goes right, it's pretty obvious, right? You take a cylindrical piece of aluminum and you stick some wings on it and you put some engines on it and it just goes, right? The Wright brothers showed us that. But if you want it to stay aloft in all conditions, that requires a lot of thought. So, and whereas with UX work, a lot of UX, the emphasis is on concentrating on how to make things go right, how to make things easy, how to make that initial experience smooth.
Yeah, finding the happy path.
The happy path, right? That's the expression that's kind of grown up around this. But in engineering, it couldn't be more different. And so when you're engineering for risk reduction and fault tolerance, you really are examining this, like the problem space deeply for even the edge, especially the edge cases. That's where you live. And having an organization that is culturally tolerant of risk is very different. Which I think is where you were going.
I think it's really important to recognize that organizations don't exist in a static moment in space and time, right? They're moving through time continuously, right? And things around them are changing. And those changes represent risk. So an intolerance to risk, right, really represents an organization's attempt to not move in time. It's literally trying to hold it steady in its space and time of the moment, because any change is a risk. And because you can't stop time, it is a relatively unrewarding effort to try. Non-risk tolerance, risk avoidance, is a counterproductive, wasteful organizational activity. Risk management is not. That's different, right? That's saying there are going to be risks. Here are mitigations. Here are risks we can manage. Here are risks we can't manage, right? That's risk management. Trying to build complete fault tolerance into a business across all variables, which sometimes seems like, hey, let's try to do that. Let's make this business bulletproof, right? Doesn't work, because time marches on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the needs of our clients change. The capacity, the promise of technology continues to change. Everything changes. It's like, it's a little like it's.
I was just thinking about, that we think through, like, what are the risks that we take on all the time. And the first thing that occurs to me in the midst of bringing on some new team members is that each new hire represents a risk that has to be taken on. I mean, there's a limited amount of information that you can gather about a person's performance in the very particular atmosphere that they will have to perform in a new job, that you can gather from a resume and a portfolio. So you're extrapolating that limited information into and making a judgment about the risk you're taking on.
Mm-hmm. That's right. I mean, when I ask myself, what is DOOR3? I mean, we are at heart we're a group of people with some processes and some kind of shared beliefs, but at the end of the day, we're just a group of people. And so the decisions that we make to expand our group, to add new members to our group, are the most important decisions we make. And certainly they all take on a certain degree of risk, because you're right, we're especially when we hire people into senior positions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think much like with the risks that people take in the marketplace with stocks, the greater the risk, the greater the reward. And I think the people that are a little untested could potentially turn out to be great talents. And that's it's helpful to think of it that way, rather than thinking that just being afraid of every unknown. It's just impossible to operate like that.
Yep. It's interesting. There are times, I mean, we are a group of people. I agree with Jonathan. I think of myself as a people, but the
rest of us think of you as a person. But go on.
Well, poetic license. But we are a group of people who have a focused set of disciplines and a focus on objectives, which is to build software that strategically enhances our clients' business, right? And so when we encounter clients who are looking for advice or development or strategy and so on and so forth in that domain, right? One of the things that we sometimes encounter is that feeling from someone who's been burned by a software development effort before, where they have an intolerance to risk, even to a small risk, that is embodied in the decision to move forward with a project that they know is necessary, right? Mm-hmm. But they're unable to get away from that feeling of like, well, it's $1 million project. How do I, last time someone said there's $1 million project, it was a $3 million project and it never finished, right? So yeah, at some point in the past, they took a risk and that risk spectacularly blew up, right? It doesn't mean that time has stopped passing and that change is no longer a pressure point on the business, right? So there is no way to, there's a way to avoid that risk at great peril to the business because the pressures that are causing one to consider taking a risk, right, are still there, right? Competitors are doing their business more productively. They're engaging their customers more creatively. They're taking market share because of those strategies. So those are typical pressures. An organization needs to grow in order to thrive, and it can't grow without breaking through some of the ceilings that are imposed on it by its operations and supply chain connectivity and whatever, right? So those pressures aren't going away. But if someone is anchored to the inability to make that decision because of a past calamity, right, it can cause a further calamity, a greater calamity, right? And I think it's important to recognize that. I'm very sympathetic to someone who's been through that sort of trauma as an executive leader and had to stand behind the decision that they made that didn't pan out very well, right? But it does mean that next time you take that risk, you have to figure out what the lessons learned were. It's usually around a couple of different things. We can talk about that in a separate episode, right? Often it's things like selecting the wrong partner, not allocating adequate attention to it internally, not picking the right target, whatever. Like I said, we'll can get into detail some other time. But whatever the lessons learned, they need to be brought forward to enable someone to feel like they've learned enough to be able to take that next risk rather than simply to wait for time, the tidal wave of time to wash over the organization. And I feel very strongly about that because being static is tantamount to suicide.
Yeah, there's sort of three options. One is become totally demoralized and not do anything. The other one is fail to learn from your mistakes and just keep doing the same thing over and over again, and replicating the problem. Or third is to take better risks that are informed.
And as the one of us here who probably spends the most time thinking about our organization, one of the things I've tried to do in the last year and a half is help people feel comfortable taking risks. And that means creating a space in which people feel comfortable failing, which also means teaching people how to fail quickly. Because I think really some of the most dangerous things and dangerous practices we have, and this kind of gets back to the theme you're working against, Alex, or working on, is clinging to the desire that tomorrow is going to be just like today, and expending all of your energy to ensure that it is so. This is wasteful. It is much better to kind of rewrite your plan, update your plan, and move on, as opposed to trying to kind of fix everything that's gone on during the day so it looks just like yesterday. And to do that kind of culturally, it does mean helping people feel comfortable with failure and understanding. And to help people feel comfortable with failure, I think they need to see that, one, it's okay. It's okay. It's going to be okay. Two, helping them appreciate the value of screwing up. Now, one of the things you and I have talked about, Alex, is back in the primordial days of software development, which is to say the 90s, back when so little of this had been figured out, when there really wasn't a practice around building software, the first draft always was broken. It was just always broken.
Yeah.
Because we didn't really have, we lacked everything. We lacked like a culture of software development. We lacked tools. Everything was being done kind of for the first time, especially on the web. because yeah, I don't mean to insult our, the folks who have even more gray hairs than we do, that we're actually successfully building client server applications in the 90s and doing it right the first time. But everything that was being built for the web in the late 90s was broken the first time. and there was at the time, just culturally, there was so much acceptance around failure, because it was known that the only way you're going to make this thing work was it's going to break a few times before it works.
I don't know. Do you think that we have some sort of like reverse rose-colored glasses about the past? I don't exactly know. I'm using the wrong term, but it does seem like things were buggier in the past. Is that it?
They were.
Is that my imagination?
No, it is not your imagination. Just I mean, one of the reasons why in 2007, Apple ruled the world with the iPhone, it wasn't just because it made things a little bit easier than using a BlackBerry. It just always worked.
I'd like to just say that I and maybe you guys can relate to this, but I've done a ton of psychotherapy on my on my schoolmates in college, because their Mac crashed and their 30-page report that they were pulling an all-nighter writing was nowhere to be found. Right? I don't know last time that it happened that I lost a document because my computer crashed. Right? Like the entire way of using computers for stuff, right, business, personal use, is much more fault tolerant and much more robust than it used to be. That's better software, better processes, a lot of things, right? That said, right, I want to go back to what Jonathan said, which is that people accepted, early failures. They did, but there was a specific way that it was accepted and a specific way that it wasn't, right? I think my recollection, Jonathan, is that failure was accepted because there were only so many computer people, so you couldn't fire them for failure very easily. Right?
I would actually. I was gonna end on that with my own hypothesis as to why it was accepted.
Well, so I'll state mine, and then please,
Okay.
No,
well.
And the other thing is that there was a sense of inevitability about it, but also a grudgingness to that acceptance. It's like, this is not going to go well. We're going to get it done eventually. But if they're saying it's $1, that means it's going to cost $2, right? If it's $1 million, that means it'll be a $2 million project. And some of that, the quantitative analysis of what failure means, right, in software has sort of carried itself forward into these days. Like I still sometimes hear from people, well, if a software company or a software developer is telling me that it's going to take them 100 days, it's going to take 200 days. And that is not, that simply is not true, right? It doesn't, like the correct failure scenario, given all the learning that has occurred, right? If you're working in a collaborative, positive partnership with people who know what they're doing, is that you plan for some early failures. You may even plan in, especially if you're using lean methodology, you may plan in a proof of concept that is very abbreviated and designed to exercise the architectural muscle around a particular business problem, and then you scrap it, and at twice that velocity, you rebuild that in a somewhat different architecture. Right?
Yeah. Can I also point out that usability testing is key to this, and it's a way to see what the failures are early before things fall apart. And I think that often clients are reluctant to invest in testing and user research because it seems like a waste of time and money, and they want to get to the product ASAP. But by doing that, they're taking on a lot of risk, and I think unfortunately that's not so transparent to the client. And we would do well in my field to be just constantly encouraging clients to invest even a tiny amount of money in user research and testing, because it can make a huge difference in the amount of risk that you're taking on.
Exactly.
So I mean, something that I think we should just acknowledge the obvious, which was in 1999, web applications were cutting edge, and I think that's where the tolerance kind of grew up from. The fact that if everything that was going on the web in the late 90s was new, it was novel, it was understood by everyone to be cutting edge. I mean, I remember we had a client, 2005, 2006, one of the early social networking companies, and they were a very early AWS client in the early days of AWS, at the time when AWS was still kind of figuring out what they were when, I believe EBS, the Elastic Block Storage offering, came out at the time that our client was an AWS tenant. And to be an AWS tenant back in those days meant, especially if you wanted to use EBS in the early days, it meant to tolerate total data loss. If you wanted to enjoy the benefits, if you wanted to be one of the first on a cloud platform with a cloud architecture, it meant one day you might come into the office and all the data was gone. So, you know, our work, really, our engagement with this company, initially it was to help them with performance, and then later it developed into helping to create an architecture which would be fault tolerant on top of this very faulty platform.
Mm-hmm.
So they wouldn't periodically just lose all of their users' data. But they tolerated it. They did, because they wanted the benefits of this amazing platform, which no one else really had. There wasn't really anything like AWS in the early days.
Yep. So, like, I do want to tie a couple of concepts together. So we talked about business risk tolerance. We talked about software project fallibility and failure scenarios and stuff like that. How do these things connect? It is not true that every software project needs to plan in failure scenarios. There are projects that are fairly straightforward, and honestly, like, if you're working with the right kind of partner, they should mostly just go right. I mean, we just completed a large project that was somewhere between $1.5 million and $2 million. I think the project was in total $80,000 over budget. So 6%, 7%, and in that 7%, we did $200,000 worth of work that another vendor was supposed to have done, right? And so, and why was that? Why did a project that size land basically on the rails, effectively below budget, right? Given our rescue effort on the side there, right? And on target with regard to scope. It's because methodologies have evolved. If you actually have been cooking the methodologies, improving them over the last 20 years like we have, you should be pretty good at this, right? Now, there are other times when, as a business, you're looking to do something that you can't easily describe. You have kind of a light bulb over your head, but it's not, you can't even tell if it's an LED or incandescent, right? That's not a time to kind of say, hey, let's specify a software initiative and make it a fixed price project. Yeah, let's get it right the first time. That's not going to happen because you don't have it right the first time. Like, it's not defined yet. So and how do you define it? You can sit there by yourself in at your kitchen table or in a dark room and think about it until you decide whether the light bulb should be an LED or incandescent, and you still don't have enough detail to specify a project. Or you can engage with a partner that whose specialty is figuring out the details behind the big idea, right? And collaborate and workshop that and begin to do some initial, tendrils of exploration and building things. Do some user research, understand whether your point of view and your intended user's point of view match, because they have wisdom to lend to. Your product concept may improve dramatically. All of those things are risk reducers. Some of them involve coding. You're coding to reduce risk. You're not coding because it is a risk to code, right? And so taking a true laboratory approach to an innovative business idea, which would allow you to eliminate the risk of stagnation and intransigence and sort of being stuck in time while time marches on, right? It involves taking on some intelligent, structured risk in the early stages of a project. And I think that partnering in the right spirit, the spirit of innovation and the spirit of moving forward in time together, right, is really, really important to realize this concept.
Yeah. So maybe in my mind, I think what I'm going to leave this conversation with is the notion that all projects, all work initiatives kind of exist on a continuum. And on one end, we have innovation, right? On one extreme, we have innovation and we have the cutting edge. And then on the other, we have something else. And, the degree to which you can consider risk tolerance should matter based on where your project or work initiative falls on this continuum.
Yep.
Yep.
And I want to sort of wrap up this idea by kind of saying, look, we're not coming at it from the perspective of some highfalutin, like we're the person on the mountain sitting on the rocks. We are a business too, and we're working through change. We're evolving as a business constantly, right? So when I say, hey, this is a good thing to do, this is not a good thing to do to help innovate together, it's really coming from a place of empathy. We deal with this too, right? I think we started by talking a little bit about DOOR3's changes and evolution, and this whole thing is this is the human journey. This is a human enterprise. I think this is the place where David Attenborough and some soft music is supposed to come in, right? But I think it's,
I like the direction you're taking, Alex.
Yeah, but I think it's very, very important to be collaborative and to move forward in time. That's my take on this.
I like it. All right, any parting words on risk? I think we should revisit this.
Parting words on risk. It's a board game too.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Good risk is good, bad risk is bad. Managed risk is good. Risk undertaken with oversight is good.
Well, I would say deliberately accepting risk is healthy. So just, being able to see the risk in your own decisions. And
right.
It's always there.
What will happen if it goes wrong?
Yeah.
That's a question that should be asked.
All the time.
Yep.
And it's a board game.
Okay.
And it's a board game.
Yes. Well, this concludes another episode of D3 TV. Open hours. Thanks, everyone.
Liz, I have an idea.
Viewers. Yeah.
I think we should just call it D3 TV.
Okay. Is that a name change? We have to rebrand.
Is that change? Is that risk? Is it risky? Can we handle it?
It is risky. We have an identity as open hours, but
do we have an identity with our viewership?
With Bob's wife, yeah. She knows us as open hours.
What is her name?
Mrs. Bob?
I don't know. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Well, hi,
Thanks,
Bob's
everybody.
wife.
We need to have a Christmas party.
And Wasim. Okay.
Oh, and Wasim. Of course.
Yeah.
Our
Okay,
Lord.
bye,
everybody.
We're going to have some